back, everyone, to another episode of Questing Onward. I am Ashton.
And I'm Whitney.
Thank you for joining us on another episode here. We're doing deep dives in the art of communication, exploring all of those nerdy loves, and overall just sharing stories, thoughts, and feelings about our life, about communication. So we have a couple announcements today.
Just make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That would really help us out. And we also love hearing about your experiences, your stories, anything that you may disagree or agree with us on. We love hearing that in the comments.
Yeah, I think one of our favorite parts so far about this is just like having the conversations with you guys, like through social media, through just face-to-face interaction, hearing how you have different opinions, how it's helped you, how, just communication's impacted your life. It's been really fun. A lot of these like topics that we talk about are things that we directly get from you guys and the involvement with also just the community in general. So we really appreciate that. And then lastly, just be there is we're putting all of these onto YouTube now, so feel free to swing on over there and hit us with a subscribe and a follow there. That'd be awesome. So on today's topic, today we wanted to talk about this concept, the concept of overall, like, there is power in unity. So we want to go ahead and kick us off here. What about some of your thoughts?
So this is something that religiously we hear a lot, this concept of being equally yoked. And recently, being on social media, I've been exposed to a lot of different opinions. And I think all of us can relate to when we get on social media, we start seeing this whole concept of, I don't need the opposite gender. For a woman, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need no man. And for a man, it can be that I'm an alpha male, like I lead and, take charge. And while those things can be true, and I agree with a lot of what both parties say, I think it overall hurts us, especially in a marriage, in relationships, in families. I think it really just pulls us down and pulls us apart. And it creates this tension, this conflict, and this need to prove that we're right and prove that we're better and prove that we can do it by ourselves and prove that we're stronger, more efficient. And it just hurts everyone overall. It's not helping anyone. So we really wanted to talk about this concept of equally yoked and the significance that has in a relationship and in our families.
Yeah, and this is something that, like, I was actually just talking about with some coworkers the other day about this exact concept, because the hard part is I'm like, so many messages are true, right? Like a lot of the concepts, the principles, just the overall conversation, it's like laced with truth. So I feel like it's so hard to try to communicate at least our viewpoints on this and like the concept of being equally yoked, because like, yeah, it's true. Women are amazing. You do need to be independent. We do need to be strong. Like, you guys do need to be powerful, and men, we do need to lead. We do need to provide, like, all true, all important. But I think that oftentimes the communication, at least the framing of the communication, like revolves around the idea of, well, I have to lessen the role of the person next to me so that my role is heightened, right? And I think that was like a lot of the early feminist movements were that kind of more modern day.
I was going to say, traditional
feminism, no, what? Modern day more so around that concept, right? Like, and same thing with the more recent like surgence of this like alpha red pill dude concept is like all over the place. And so, we've been talking a lot about this, and we found that, like, at least we were reading about the history of horses, like the idea of being like equally yoked. And we wanted to kind of talk, because like is a way that really shares at least our thoughts on the concept of being together as a relationship. Like, what is that unity and power in unity specifically? What does that look like? So what was the thing we were talking about with like the horses? I thought it was kind of interesting that we were sharing.
Yeah. So when you're looking at a traditional draft horse, they can pull up to 8,000 pounds by themselves. And that can go, there's huge competitions where you can look these up, and the horses are magnificent and the strength is absolutely incredible. But when you start looking at a draft horse, when it's paired with another draft horse, when there's two of them pulling, the pulling amount doesn't just double, it triples. So it's not 16,000, I think it's 24,000 pounds that they can pull together. And then beyond that, if you have a team of draft horses that have trained and worked together, it quadruples. So they can pull up to 32,000 pounds. And I love that analogy because when you're looking at a pair of draft horses that are pulling, you're not looking at one on the left and saying, oh, that one is clearly pulling 500 pounds more than the one on the right. That's not how that works, right? You're looking at this team and it's absolutely incredible to watch, just this feat of strength. And not only that, when they've been training together, they're pulling off of each other's signals. They're communicating with each other. They're working together.
Yeah.
And there's not one pulling in front of the other. They're side by side. And I think that's the whole concept that we really want to reiterate here is in a marriage, when we start in a marriage, you're pulling side by side. And the left one and the right one, they're on different sides. They're not pulling on the same position, right? But they're pulling together, and together they're stronger. There's not a lead. They're together. They both respect each other. They work together.
Yeah.
And they're not comparing each other.
Yeah. And I think that like, obviously it's not like exactly a 1-for-1, right? Because like it isn't like we're constantly pulling the same task. I think that's like what makes, marriage is a lot more complex than that, right? There's kids involved. There's a rearing of children. There's having to bring in some form of income. I understand there's a lot more levels to this than just simply pulling a horse. But I think the concept of it is, the ideology or the viewpoint of what does it look like for these horses, right? And I think Whitney spelled it out at least really well. And this is like, the way we try to view our marriage is through the lens of like, we're both pulling together. At times, one person's going to be pulling harder than the other, right? Like if one of us slips, you got to keep the carriage in motion. It has to keep going, right? And that's okay. But it's not a matter of like, I'm so much stronger than you, so I'm going to, like you said, like I'm not pulling 500 pounds more and everyone's watching me to pull harder. It's like, no, it's just the whole viewpoint of it should be that we work together. We have different roles. We have different goals. We have different things we have to accomplish. But nevertheless, we're constantly engaged in pulling together at everything we do. And like that is the thing we focus on. And it's like, I don't know, I think just like in today's society, we just focus so much on like the menial tasks of how important those little tasks are. And my task is more important than yours because of XYZ, or these stats show that. And I just think at the end of the day, it's, what message do you share with your spouse? Is it a message of like, we're together in all things and like, I don't care, we just make it work? Or is it a message of like, I'm pulling harder? And I don't know. I think that's like something I feel like a lot of people, there's a lot of strife. And I think we were talking about this the other day. I thought there's something, if you don't mind sharing, I thought was really powerful when we were talking about how like, what do you feel like from like a woman's standpoint when, like if you had a husband who was constantly focusing on like all the hard things he had to do, how do you feel like, I don't know if you remember what we were talking about when we were having this conversation, but how do you feel like that would make you feel to come home to that all the time?
So was this the conversation where we talked about being undervalued?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is something that when I go to Ashton, I know that he's working 10 times harder in different ways than I am. I understand that he's trying to provide financially. I understand that he has to make a name for himself, a brand for himself at work. I understand all of these things, and there are things that I can't relate to. But on the flip side, same goes for me. And I think if Ashton were to come home and I were to go to him and say, today was such a hard day, like with the kids, it was crazy. They were all over me. I just feel overstimulated. If Ashton were to look at me and say, yeah, man, it's so much harder when I go to work than it is for you to stay here and be a mom, I would freaking throat punch him. I would be so pissed. But instead, he listens to me. He understands me. And even though we're not going through the same experience and we don't have the same roles necessarily, it's something that he adds value to me, and he sympathizes and understands what I'm going through. It's not a competition. And I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, but this is not a competition of who has it the hardest. This is something that he comes home, he sees, wow, I can tell that you've really been trying to pull things together, having dinner ready for me, having laundry done, the kids bathed. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing. And he makes sure to go out of his way to compliment me and give value to what I'm doing, even if it's not the same thing that he's doing. And as a woman's standpoint, I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that, because while I love being a mother, it is hard to give up and sacrifice, and you don't get the credit, so to speak, as someone that works full time, and that's okay. It's just it's
a completely different sacrifice, right? Like and I think that's the part that's so hard is like, I I think we oftentimes try to compare these things as though it's like, I work harder, I do harder work, my job's more difficult. It's like, even if that's true, which I don't believe it is, but let's just for argument's sake put that on the table and say it is, doesn't matter. Like, that's not what it's about with marriage, right? It's about being unified, being together. And so I think overall, yeah, I think that's what's most important. So we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, though. Like, if you have any other thoughts or have any other opinions, or I don't know, guess like what's been your experience in your relationship with this idea of being equally yoked, or hopefully this has helped you in some way, and we'd love to hear it. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.